MTN's full-year headline earnings per share increased 2% to R10.89 as foreign exchange losses weighed. Revenue ticked up 11% to R135 billion, and that's supported by solid organic growth in South Africa. Joining us live now in studio to discuss the results further is Dobek Patter from Africa Analysis. Dobek, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. It seems the market's very disappointed with the numbers that have filtered through from MTN today. Yes, we've seen revenue up 11%, but many of the commentators we've been speaking to saying it would be nice to see that filter through to the bottom line as well.
Yes, it is, yeah, I suppose, and net profit has been down. It's been down to about just over 15% from 17 last year. So even though the company is still showing very good growth across its operations, I think it's coming under significant pressure from all sorts of corners, which is not translating into bottom line improvement. I'd say, in fact, it's the reverse, and there are some key markets where MTN has seen, I think, a lot of pressure put onto it. Nigeria is the one that comes to mind most significantly.
Mm-hmm. Dobek, if you have a look at the way that MTN has progressed and the way that Vodacom, its rival, if you like, has progressed as well. Initially, of course, when MTN was more successful with its overseas expansion, it was rewarded by shareholders. Now it seems to be exactly the opposite. Maybe they go a little bit too fast. Maybe they're not able to handle their currency exposure via an efficient treasury department or departments. Is that the impression you're getting?
No, I think MTN is still a very good performer in many markets within its jurisdictions in Africa and the Middle East. I think what is happening is that initially those markets were in early growth phase, so there was the ramp-up growth. Now some of these markets are beginning to mature. The game is switching from voice increasingly towards data, although still relatively early days overall. But we have seen intensifying competition in the voice space, and majority of revenues are still generated from voice. And I think that's one of the reasons we're just seeing that transition in the market. Apart from that, it's also a number of other issues, such as, for instance, the Turkcell case in respect of the Iranian license, sanctions in Iran itself, problems in Syria, obviously, with effectively a war going on there. So that has compounded MTN's I think problems. But maybe apart from that, also with the departure of Putuma as the CEO in the group, who was very much a financial driver and on an acquisition spree, we now see a management that has to now consolidate its positions within the different markets and actually take these the different operations forward from a period where they were entering the markets, so fast growth in the markets, to where they need to start moving into different market segments and enterprise, addressing the enterprise market segment through ISP, fixed line type services is one of those. So I think that those are the different issues that have compounded towards that. We've also seen, I think, relatively good performance in terms of MTN share over the past number of months. In fact, a couple of days ago, I think the share improved, and it effectively today it's decreased a couple of percentage points.
Are we being a little bit too critical of MTN and its progress? Because if you're looking at group subscribers, that number increased 15.1%.
Yes.
So where you're talking about mature markets, they're still managing to rake in new subscribers.
Yes, yeah, I think definitely. And if we look at individual subscribers as opposed to SIM cards, because what we're looking at here in terms of 189 million subscribers are actually SIM cards. Now, we know that in many markets, people have 2 SIM cards, sometimes 3 SIM cards. There's also machine-to-machine applications that are growing, which are not individuals. So in terms of organic growth, those penetration levels are lower than it would seem, and there's still quite a bit of growth left. However, I think what we need to consider is the fact that in many of the African markets, especially, that growth is in lower market segments, low disposable income levels, when MTN and other operators start targeting those, digging deeper into their social fabric. So the maturity comes in the form of very relatively high penetration within the middle class, also the upper end to middle end of the market, the people who have more money to spend, and also in terms of spend patterns and usage patterns, the actual behavior of the subscriber moving now increasingly from voice, moving towards data, and over time into some sort of a multi-service application over the mobile line. Also in terms of market maturity, in terms of the competitive levels. So whilst before we could afford as mobile operators to charge relatively high prices in Africa especially and get away with it, the competition has intensified significantly over the past 2 years, which means operators need to develop new business models to be able to compete in those environments and look for new revenue opportunities. And it's been competitive to the point where MTN has actually reversed its downward trend in pricing back up because of that, because of probably future unsustainability.
Dobek, we focus on international. It's a South African company though, and ARPU, that's average revenue per user, is on a bit of a downward trend. How significant might that be for future earnings for the company?
Well, I think certainly, and that ARPU still reflects very much, I think, voice spend with the increased subscribers on the back of it. What we're going to see going forward is at some point more of a leveling of ARPU as data subscriptions really expand and as data spend appreciates. What we see, for instance, in more developed markets in the US, Europe, is that subscribers with smartphones and data packages effectively using the high-end 3G networks and the so-called 4G networks, their ARPU is about twice as high as subscribers who still use more traditional voice and basic data services. So we'll see a bit of the same trend coming through here, which means it will halt or certainly mitigate the ARPU decline. But it is a concern because in terms of voice services, which still constitute, in the case of South Africa, 75% of total revenue, thereabouts, that those revenues will start coming under pressure, and that growth will start to decline year on year, and eventually probably start reversing it at some point a few years from now. And that's where other revenue streams need to start taking hold and appreciating.
Yeah.
But MTN, I'm not sure you can call MTN a South African company. It's listed in South Africa, but revenues generated from MTN South Africa are now a smaller part of overall group revenues.
Of course, it's given us a sense of the telecoms environment, the operating environment out there, and we're expecting numbers out of Vodacom reporting earnings on the 20th of May. What are your expectations there relative to what we've seen come through from MTN today?
I think Vodacom is still very much a very South African focused company, although it has been expanding its operations in terms of revenues across a few different African markets as well. But I think if we look at MTN and its performance in the South African market and what's happening also in the competition space on voice services and data services over the past year, I think we probably cannot expect stellar results from Vodacom. It's coming under the same pressure as MTN is in terms of downward pressure on revenues, decrease in mobile termination rates, which puts a downward pressure on that revenue stream as well.
We'll wait to see. Dobek, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for having joined us this afternoon. Dobek Patter is with Africa Analysis and, of course, unpacking MTN's numbers, which were released this morning.